the territory we're talking about tonight is Act 3, which is the stage of life that we used to think of as retirement. And our book, Act 3, The Art of Growing Older, is all about what this 30 years or so of 50-ish to 80-ish could include. So that in the end, we can get to the end of our life and die without regrets, or when all of the choices really slim down, we have at least a chance to think we got up to some good things. So
we've had some really great emails from people.
We have.
Last,
we love it.
Few weeks.
It's
talking
great
about how they've interacted with this Zoom thing, and also been reading the book. And this is not really a book promotion, but we'd be delighted if you bought it. But we're really interested in the ideas in the book working for you. So that's the thing which is very exciting to us when they tell us that it's going on.
So as many of you will know, we did key relationships last week, and some people got in touch about things they have done as a result. And we will say the same at the end of this week as well, is what's the one or two things you're really going to take away and try. So somebody wrote and said that they did have their family meeting after all, using the 3 C's that we talked about, and it was satisfying and a respectful forum. And that person felt more supported and appreciated, and several difficult issues were thrashed out.
What were the 3 C's?
So that's about how to have a family meeting. And do you know, I've forgotten. Hang on, I know this.
No, you do know.
I do know this. I'll come back to you.
Yes.
Anyway, so, and someone else said...
Is that a health issue?
Yeah, probably. No, it's just Act 3 brain not working.
Okay, right.
We're not responsible for other people's actions. We are not responsible for other people's actions, but we can acknowledge how they and ourselves are feeling. And then someone else wrote in and said, in relation to a sibling, I find it fascinating reflecting back on situations from our past with my sister. She had a totally different take than me on various situations and things that happened, largely interactions with parents. Things that irked or disturbed her weren't issues for me, and reflecting back on these things has been great to understand. So that's just a little snapshot of some of the people who've written to us. Again, yeah, we absolutely love any comments, any ideas, any contributions are very welcome.
It's really nice, gratifying at this stage of our lives to have that chance to reflect on stuff over the years. I was looking last night on back at some stuff from my old school, and it just seems like an awful long time ago, but actually it's weird to think it was still me, and it's still me now. And it's a weird thing, this age thing, isn't it?
So I've remembered the 3 C's.
Oh, okay.
So this is for family meetings. C is for checking in, and that's the first thing, is just to make sure that you've had a chance for everyone to say how they are doing, how you're feeling, are we all right, rather than jumping straight in with a list of tasks. And then out of that, the tasks will emerge anyway. And then C in the middle is for get creative. So we are a problem-solving race, and it's a chance to brainstorm ideas about how to make family life go better. And then the last C is for commitment. What are you actually going to do, and who's writing it down? And also we would say do it regularly. We meet at some point on a Sunday late afternoon to just look at the week coming up and what everyone's needs and wants might be.
So we'll move on to what we're going to be doing tonight. Well, we're delighted that so many people have subscribed to the mailing list, and thank you for doing that. And we don't want to keep on bashing over the head with emails. So thank you for engaging with that. Next week, we're going to have a week off. As Judy said, this is the 6th one of these Zooms we've done, and we're going to have a week off next week. But after that, we want to come back and do more of what you would like to do. So we're going to introduce, Tilly, if you could just bring up the poll. What would you like to discuss next time we come back in a week or so? So in the branches of our tree, these are the areas which people often, we often talk to people about. The home, the issues around that, stuff to do with work. Obviously, that's pretty important at the moment for a lot of people in lockdown. Play, that's a really interesting issue. What place does play take in your life in Act 3? Friends, which may be separate to the key relationships topic that we talk about in the roots. Money, a lot of people come to our workshops thinking that money is a big concern of theirs, and so that's something we could talk about. And curiously, when people first started coming to our workshops about 3-4 years ago, the world was not something that was very pressing to them, was it? But that might be a great deal more pressing now than it was then. So if you'd like to vote now,
pick one.
So we'll just wait a couple of seconds, press 1,
just
and
go
then
with your gut.
Submit. Don't wait, spend too long thinking about it, and then we'll get the results later on. So Tilly, the master director, will tell us.
I think we have to vote as well. I'm going to put that.
Okay. So
okay,
that's all done.
Yeah.
Are we all okay with that, Tilly?
Yep, just the last few people coming in now.
Okay. I think it's the Australians and the New Zealanders who are a little bit behind, aren't they? It's coming right across India now. It's flying in over the Mediterranean, and now it's crossing the M25, and there it is. I think it's probably in now.
Okay, great.
So, as we said earlier, Tilly, could you show the tree slide?
Yeah.
The book is based around the idea that our life is sort of like a tree. The things that we just mentioned, home, work, money, play, friends, world, are the things that are in the branches, the things that are more visible. And they're all supported by our health, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight. But health, in turn, is supported by the 4 roots: attitude, purpose, values, key relationships. Everything is supported by that. So that's the kind of thing, if you forget everything else, that's about the book. Overall, that's the thing we're talking about. And we're delighted to have tonight Professor Richard Vincent, who wrote the chapter on health in our book. And so we'll come to him in a minute. But just before we do that, Tilly, we're just going to ask you about housekeeping.
Yeah.
How are we going to do that?
So everyone's muted as usual, but there will be a chance to have a say later on. We've also got a chat feature, which I'm just sending you all a message now. So if you have any comments or questions or thoughts, then please do put them in the chat box. Mum and Dad will have a look at that as well. And
my name's Adrian.
Sorry, Adrian and Judy will be looking at them later. This is being recorded, just to remind you.
Okay, yeah, and as we think it's very important to say this, is that this is not an evening on retirement options for pensions and cruising and playing golf or anything like that. This is a place that, particularly last week, actually will reach to the very heart of you. So it's your responsibility to take care. If we can have the take care slide. And those of you who've been reading our book, we put this in throughout the book when we were asking you to sort of reach quite deep into your heart, mind and soul and make the most. You know, we want you to take a risk tonight, engage, enjoy Richard's expertise and his all-round interest in this subject particularly. So with that in mind...
we're going to ask you to... Oh, yeah, you're sorry.
We're going to just do what we always do, which is to just remember that we are also incredibly lucky that we're pretty much fit, well and in good nick to be able to come on a thing like this evening. And I think every single one of us will know someone who's struggling or who's unwell or perhaps even dangerously unwell. We're thinking of 2 friends of ours whose parents are in care homes with coronavirus. So,
and I had an aunt died this week with the virus.
Yeah, and I was just talking to our neighbour when we went out to Clap, and their 7-year-old boy, I said to his dad, "How's it going?" And he said, he's absolutely fed up now. He really, really wants to see his friends. So we're week 7. And so this candle is for anyone that you're thinking of as well.
And so while we're thinking on that topic, I hope you've got a piece of paper and a pencil, because I want you to do a quick sketch for yourself, which we will, show later. We'll do a show and tell. Please draw what it's like for you to be in lockdown. I don't want any words, please. Just what pops into your head. Don't think too much about it. Just scribble on a piece of paper in front of you with whatever art materials you have. And I'm going to, and I was in advertising, I'm going to give you 60 seconds starting now. So don't hang about, don't dilly-dally or think too much. This has got to come from your subconscious.
Anything is fine. There's no right answers.
Exactly. It's not a competition.
Oh, we could make it. No, okay.
We could make it into a competition, but we won't, Judy.
Okay.
And
you should be drawing.
I think I will be drawing. Yeah.
I'm going to draw.
And the pencil will now be whizzing across your page. You've got 30 seconds left. You've got 10 seconds left. Okay, thank you. We're going to hold on to that and we'll show and tell later. So health. Now, Tilly, can we see the WHO slide? The World Health Organization, as Richard told me, defined health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Of course, the WHO is Donald Trump's favorite organization at the moment, isn't it? What are we doing about?
Well, I think it's important. We're sticking with Act 3, obviously, tonight. And what I think is interesting is that health is so much more than just our body wearing out. So I'm aware that when I go out and do a run or something like that, I'm much more clicky and achy. And if I try and do yoga, it takes me quite a long time to, actually sit comfortably cross-legged on the floor. I'm not interested in it as much anymore. But there's various areas that we would love to cover with Richard tonight. So that's health and many of them will overlap, absolutely. So physical, things like what we're eating, how we're exercising, what sleep is doing, menopause issues, weight changing and body changes generally. So double chins, grey hairs, more wrinkles, all that kind of thing. Then there's the mental state of health, which I think our generation is much better at talking more honestly about that than perhaps our parents or previous generations. So that would cover all those difficult and challenging feelings of anxiety, perhaps hopelessness, capability, can I, can't I, things like habits and addictions that can also creep in here, which obviously are blurring with the physical, but also the emotional side, our well-being, the state of our relationships, which we talked about last week. And then also spiritual health, that is a category which Richard will talk about a little bit, because it is recognised as part of our overall health, and that gives us our sense of purpose. What else does it give us?
So, well, what are you doing for your own well-being in Act 3?
Well, I took up running 10 years ago, and I couldn't run 250 yards, and now I can run about 6K. So
I didn't see you run for the first 20 years of our marriage.
No, and I just thought I need to do something about getting fitter, because I had a few good friends who were ill, and in fact I lost a couple of good friends to breast cancer, and I thought, well, if I'm here, maybe I should do something about looking after myself a bit better. So I move a bit more, eat and drink a bit less is the overarching theme, I would say. I also suffer from asthma, so I have to be mindful of things that strengthen my lungs as well. Yeah. What about you?
Well, I've been cycling a lot, cranking up the old heart, and I suffered from sleep apnea and drove Judy mad with snoring for a long time before I got a CPAP machine. So I now sleep with Darth Vader on my face.
What does that do for you? In case people don't know what you're talking about.
It forces air into my lungs. It feels a bit odd, but it helps me sleep without snoring. I also started last summer a Slimming World thing, which I managed to lose a stone, which I'm pleased about. So I'm not smug about it, but I think it's going in the right direction. But it's interesting that it is possible. I kind of imagined you were stuck with everything at this stage of your life, but actually I've discovered in the researching for our book that you can change yourself at this stage. It's not too late. Well,
there's lots of apps out there like Couch to 5K, things like that. Yeah. But in terms of the other side of health as well, I think it's about attitude, and both of us try and stay in the present, not worry too much about what's coming, and watch out for things like doom and gloom and hopelessness, which can happen, but it's just being mindful and not letting things like that really overrule.
So we'd like to introduce Richard now. He wrote the chapter in the book on health. He's the Emeritus Professor at Brighton and Sussex Medical School. And Richard, what does that mean? I don't know what an Emeritus Professor is.
Oh, yeah. Hello. First of all, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Yes, I didn't have to go anywhere. That's great. I'm locked in. Right. Yeah. Hello, and hello to everybody else. What does an Emeritus Professor mean? What does a professor mean? Yes, somebody who's absent-minded. I qualify for that pretty well. And the emeritus bit actually is a bit tied up with the Act 3 setting, because if you have been a professor for a while at university, which I was, and you leave employment, that is sort of like retire, they still like you to help them, but they don't pay you. And that's what emeritus means. You basically can contribute for nothing. But it's very nice because it means I can keep up with the medical school down the road, which we helped put together some while. And I had been there in that medical school and across the road in Sussex University doing medical research for pretty much most of my career, as well as looking after people's hearts as a cardiologist.
Can we ask how old you are?
92. Oh, no, that's not right. 74. This next coming birthday, which is very soon. I'll give you the date if I want any presents.
So take it away. Where would you like to go from here?
Well, let me just follow that along a bit, because Adrian, Judy, it's been very good to get to know you in this world of Act 3, which is, as you'll probably gather, where I am and have been for a while. And that meant that so leaving to do something else wasn't just into space, which was there for a little bit, but more appropriately, it took me into working with a group, a charitable group that I've been working with for a number of years called Prime, which goes around the world teaching people about health and medicine, very much in this holistic frame, very much to do with body, mind, spirit, and society, relationships, close and relationships wide. And so I had the privilege of traveling many thousands of miles. I think I went to about 20 different countries during the following 10 years, and went to rural countryside places in Africa, and also very high power stuff in America or Singapore and the Balkans and all sorts of places. And the interesting thing for me was that everywhere we went and talked about this sort of approach to health, as opposed to the mechanistic of just putting the diseases right once you've gone into hospital or GP land, treating the whole person, and also recognizing that the whole person contributes to health in its broadest sense, and indeed to health in the narrow sense of some of those specific diseases like cancer and heart attack and dementia, which is worrying people. So, Tilly, I wonder if I could have those roots again to the tree that we were looking at earlier. Because for my money, looking at these and reading about them in the book, these are the sorts of things which, if pursued well, are a benefit to health, because they fit into us as whole people. And we do know that those sorts of roots travel into the world of health and therefore what we can do. And we do know that things like hopelessness, things like loneliness, things like anger, things like lack of forgiveness, they all have an impact on our health. And they do that not just mentally. We're so bound together. They affect the incidence and mortality of cancer and heart attack, and several other major diseases. We'll go up to the tree, if we may, because then there's the health, which will build onto that, which is leading us, of course, to what we can do and can't do. So going around the world and talking about these things, it was fascinating, as I say, that people all around the world recognized that, even if they were in the very high-power situations of teaching hospitals in rich countries, and brought into that. So that's where I've been and what I've been doing. And it has indeed been extremely useful and valuable to me in that period of time.
And just to say, if anyone wants to be thinking of questions to ask Richard or comments, do send them in, and we'll be collecting them towards the to the end of Richard's part of this as well. So fire away with your questions as well as we're going along. So Richard, is there a particular route that you want to talk about, or a particular area of the tree?
Well, I think what I'd like to talk about, if I may, is the question: what bothers us most? What are the sort of things that we think about when we're wanting to stay healthy? And as you said, we do gradually wear out. We've been aging since we were 20. And Adrian's point is very pertinent as well. what we're doing is getting the best of what we can be, and often that is going up a bit in the way we are. And I think we think in terms of the big things of health, perhaps, of the things that might actually, get rid of us from this coil, the cancers, the heart attacks, the strokes, the dementia, and as Judy was saying, a bit more, perhaps the mental illnesses. We know now that depression is, the commonest illness in the world, according to the WHO, with significant follow-on effects into physical health as well. What people, I think, may be thinking about is how do we overcome these things? And in the health chapter, of course, we go through quite a few. The ones that I think we tend to think of first, well, we've heard some. One is exercise. What's my thought on that? Well, I think the thought about exercise is, if there was one thing I wanted to choose that can contribute to our health, it is actually exercise. It contributes to our physical health and our mental health, our longevity, our mood. And if you do the exercise, which is movement, if you do it outside, if you do it in green trees or even brown trees and green grass, that has an effect. The greenery is the exact opposite of the colour of the back of our eyes. And that means that our eyes are most relaxed by looking green because that's their most sensitive colour. And so that all contributes. We've learnt about trees joining together and feeding each other and looking after each other by the root system. And there's a lot of benefit from exercising in those areas. Then again, not to take it desperately seriously. I mean, I don't mind saying that, some of us in the family count how many steps we take, when we walk out every day or upstairs or from the bedroom to the kitchen. And,
yeah, it's getting very, very difficult.
Yeah, so that the number is high. I don't think there's any huge merit in worrying about the number. And we do know that the things like Fitbit and other measurements that you make of physiology to get more healthy can have a detrimental effect because people get actually focused on those and their anxiety goes up and they get gold.
There's a saying in the cycling world, where if it's not on Strava, it didn't happen, which is Strava's an app which measures all that stuff.
Yeah.
And the trouble is, if you actually think that's true, that's a problem, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, we know of cases of depression where people have not got the numbers they thought they should have. Well, that's a, bad idea.
Yes.
So there's exercise is one. Diet, there's a lot about diet. Just drink olive oil. Very straightforward. Not altogether. You can flavour it with things like fish, vegetables. The business about sugar is interesting because I think it's not quite realised, perhaps, that sugar is absorbed and turned into the fundamental sugar on which we all run, which is glucose. But we can only store a certain amount of that, and the rest of it gets turned into fat, because fat is an efficient storer of energy in the body, twice as efficient than sugar. And that increases our cholesterol, and that's not a very good idea. So it's not just the sugar and the overweight, it's that it becomes one of those unwelcome sorts of fat.
Can I ask you something?
Of course.
What's middle-aged spread?
It's quite delicious.
Why do we get it? Why around here?
Well, it's not just outside that goes around here. The gut behind it has a lot of fat between all its many twists and turns. And it seems quite a convenient place. I mean, if you were going to store stuff, you need some space. The abdomen can expand as much as you'd like it to. And it is also interesting that in one of the measurements of risk of heart disease, stroke, etc., the circumference of your waist, as you probably know, is one of those important things. And there is a whole sort of set of things which go with that: central obesity, raised blood pressure, getting diabetes, all of which add up to much an increased risk for the usually bad news diseases. But it's partly that. We don't have a lot of muscle there, which gets used when you exercise, and it's got little labels on it to abdomen, some of the fat that you eat. The other things I find that some folks worry about is sleep. Again, the body is very, very clever. Sleep is desperately important. We mentioned in the book that, you know, if you don't have enough of it for a long time, any of it for a long time, you actually kill yourself. But sleep is an extraordinary thing, you know, because it's not just a question of switching off. It's a question of switching off certain bits of us, while other bits in our brain get on with sorting out whatever's happened during the day. So we need it because there's a sort of brain reset mechanism. And that is quite critical. However, the brain and the body and most of God's creation altogether is incredibly well built to cope with variations. And so I worry that people worry too much about sleep sometimes, because the body has a habit of recovering. If you lose some sleep, the components of sleep the next night will rebalance that a fair bit. And you don't necessarily need to stay in bed any longer. You might get more prominent dreams, and those phases which deal with dreams will be extended, so it catches up. So one thing is not to worry too much about it. In the book, all sorts of recommendations as how to sleep comfortably in terms of heat and all those sorts of things. But on the other hand, if it is really getting very bothersome, then I think it is worthwhile, if you can find one, go to a general practitioner, because there are other underlying things that might be a problem, and it might be that those need sorting out more than just the sleep itself.
And do you think some people just need less sleep?
Well, yes, that is true, though very interestingly, there's a pretty narrow range, actually, between 6 and 8 hours, which the majority of people by far will find adequate. There are people who can get away with 4 hours of sleep a night. There are people who need more than that, 8 or 10 hours sleep a night. But the majority, you know, if it's somewhere between 6 and 8, that is likely to be absolutely fine. And that's where it sits. 7 is the average.
Mm.
I
like that thing. I like that thing you said about if you have had a rubbish night's sleep, and that's what we find sometimes is it's fine to have a nap, but around about lunchtime, for about 20 minutes, you know, don't go to bed at 5:30 and
no,
2 hours.
Not at all after 3. I mean, you know, this is always the claim of the elderly, isn't it? When I was a little boy, as a junior doctor, we would start work on Friday morning and go to bed on Monday evening, because that's how it was. And it compensates again. I mean, there was some sleep in that time, but not a lot. But the body is remarkable at catching up again afterwards. Now, that is a capacity that we tend to lose as we get older. But I think that the long nap, the nap longer than 20 minutes during the day, is not a great recommendation for me, I would say. I fall asleep over I'm eating, or I fall asleep if I'm listening to Meryl, if I'm, you know, in conversation which is deep and meaningful. The other area of worry about things is stress, isn't it? It's always, you know, stress is what does us in.
Before we get to this may link a couple of questions on the wires here. People are asking about.
We're going to keep.
No, well, I was going to say a couple of questions are about why are people having more strange dreams in lockdown?
Very really, it's interesting. One of the, you know, this rapid eye movement phase, the REM phase of sleep, which is where we get all these dreams. Those are where, interestingly, the front bit of brain and the bits of brain that have temporary memories in them get shuffled round to other parts of the nervous system, other parts of the brain. And if, therefore, there is a sort of jangle going on, that actually takes harder work to sort out. It is actually one of the ways which the brain is sort of sorting that stuff out. And I have to say that in this lockdown period, I've noticed that myself. I think we are all getting increasingly uptight with what's happening. We've got buckets of bad news getting to our heads. And what's happening during the night is that those normal mechanisms for sorting out our daily memories and thoughts are having to work harder. So those dreams are more prominent and they're probably more prolonged. you might have read in the book that the very interesting thing, the phase of that which happens just before you wake up, say about 5 o'clock if you're going to wake up at 6 or 7, that is very interesting, because there the memories of the day are sent from front to back of the brain. And at the back of the brain, there's a sort of filtering system which tries to take out the emotional response to something that was disturbing and just leave you with the data of what the response, of what the event was that is giving you that terribly jangly mind. So I think it's widely reported that this is true, that people have longer, deeper, more disturbing sort of dreams when we're in this state.
So I interrupted you there, and because I thought you're going to go into the next.
We're going
slide.
to.
Yes, you've got 25 on your. You've got 25. Is that really an Act 3 age? Or is that?
Yes, that's my age.
Even reversed
in my head. It's not even reversed, sadly. I'm going to be 64 in lockdown in a couple of weeks. 65. No, 65.
65, yes. It was always good to knock off 2 years.
Let's talk about stress for a minute, because I think it's massively important in Act 3, but especially at the moment. So what have you got for us, Richard?
Okay. Well, stress is an interesting thing. It's a technical term in medicine. It's a technical term in engineering. But anyway, we brought along a sort of graph, which I think Tilly is going to help us look at. So this is a very, in my world, common plot. So along the bottom is pressure, or how much you feel under pressure, or how much pressure you're having to give yourself to do something. And on the left-hand side, the performance, that's about what you get for your money, if you like. So let's start with the beginning. So if actually there's no much pressure, then not an awful lot gets done. And, you know, some people get frustrated. And that's actually an area that we're in at the moment, because we're not doing as much as we used to, which is quite interesting. And our performance drops off, even though we've got the capability to do it. But there's nothing to drive us. And that's affecting us as well. But if we creep up a bit to the next slide, then we get on a very nice curve, which is, you know, we're working, we're putting some pressure on, we're being productive, things are going okay. And we're thinking about what more to do with planning. And generally, that's a very helpful sort of part of life as you're growing up to it. And the pressure is okay. Then we go a bit further when you're just being pushed a bit more. Now, this may be somebody else pushing you. It could be in work. But I would say that in retirement, when everybody knows you haven't got much to do, it is possible for some folks to be really pressed because they know that you've got oodles of time and therefore are available to be really helpful. And it can build up. And it can mean you have little rest and you'll have long hours of doing stuff. Maybe it's exciting, but maybe not quite so exciting. So the curve is beginning to fall off, a bit overstretched. And then again, following it along some more, if we add the pressure, now this is where things start getting really not at all good. Because here you've exceeded what you can really do. But if you're trying harder, then it's not working. And if it's not working, well, you're clearly tired. You may well not be sleeping well, with all those things to catch up with in your head, or just not enough time allowed. And you begin to not do things so well. And that troubles you because you used to do it very well. And you're trying to get on top of stuff. And you try harder and harder and use up more energy. And the end of the story is really quite grim. And this we do see in people. It's called burnout, really from the orange downwards, where really you get disabled with that. So that's a curve which shows that pressure has a sort of optimum around in the middle of this curve. But once you go over the top quite quickly, it can fall down there. Well, then the stress at the beginning, when we're thinking that we're working hard, we've got a lot to do, that's not too bad. I mean, that's not going to be bad for you at all. That's going to be good. But it's where it gets to a point where you're thinking, I really can't quite cope with this, but I will try. Somebody's wanting something, I must do it. Once you start getting to the, I don't quite like what's going on here, and yet it's still piling on, then that can tip you over the edge. So stress has different effects according to how much stress there is and according to your capacity to do stuff in response. But everybody has some place on that curve, and the curve will be different for different people. So the trick is...
Sorry, carry on.
No,
I was just going to say that I think a lot of people at the beginning of lockdown might have been in the yellow box, where there was a little bit of excitement almost about, oh my goodness, what is all this? How are we going to manage? And families having to reboot and have people suddenly come and live with them, or children around at home and no school. And that a lot of it has now moved over to tired, the orange one. And I, you know, there will be people in the red zone, but it was interesting that orange box is where I feel a lot of people are at the moment.
Yes, and it's an easy box to get into, actually. A lot of people.
What's interesting, Richard, because you did a version of that curve for the book, and this is a revised and I think a better version. And what's different is that last bit of the curve is much steeper. The way we drew it in the book, it's more an even curve, isn't it?
Yes, and that's been true for a long time.
Yeah, the fall off is much more sudden.
Yeah. So one question is, so what do we do? Well, the first thing is, sometimes we ask people to suggest, and we talk to doctors around the world about this from their point of view, and other health staff, is, can you, having seen this curve, can you see where you might sit on it yourself? Just from the point of view of wondering, you know, what can happen before or after, thinking about that level. Another thing that we suggest is, because sometimes what happens is people know that they're here sort of somewhere inside, but other people notice it more. And therefore, one of the things I think around the orange level, Judy, that you were talking about, actually goes back to conversation and having an opportunity to express this stuff and feel safe to express that's how you feel. And perhaps for other people seeing it, taking a sympathetic view and a supportive view, so that the whole problem can be examined for what it is and not seen to be a failing. Because people who are inclined to push themselves will see that being in the orange zone is just their failing to do, you know, what they should be doing. And that's a place to get out of. And I think the place to get out of it is when you have people around you who are, you know, friendly towards you, recognise you know what you're like, and have a bit of space, forge a bit of space for folks like that. Maybe you have to do it for them and engage in a conversation about, you know, just how it ticks, how life is, reconnecting with the ordinariness of life, which isn't in that orange zone.
Okay, there's, gosh, so many things that popping into my mind, but we did want to put this into two sections tonight for Richard's contribution. One was about general things that help us all in Act 3, but also we know that there is the elephant in the Zoom, which is, of course, the pandemic that we are in the grips of at the moment. So now might be a good moment, Richard, to ask people to get their drawings out and just show us what you've drawn.
What have you drawn, Jude?
So I drew that.
Oh.
Just means how up and down I feel, and how one day can be all right, one day can be terrible, and also that there's a lot of us in the household here, so anybody could be having a particularly good or difficult day, but that's what it feels like, a big emotional swing and also a physical swing about who needs what. What have you drawn?
Anyone else? Let's someone want to hold up their picture?
Mine's too small. You won't recognise mine. Oh, that's nice. Yes.
Oh, in prison.
Oh, well done, Angela. Yes.
Yeah,
There's a bird outside.
Yes.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I can't easily show you mine because it's very tiny. Oh, look, there's one.
Oh,
Oh,
there's one, a lovely one. So,
What we got going on there? It looks like a plant on the left.
and maybe someone walking around who do you want to talk
There's
about
a-
that one?
There's a
Who-
road and a train
I
track.
don't know who that is.
Somebody's.
Graham. Oh, hi, Graham. You need to unmute yourself.
What you done there, Graham?
Yes, it's growing tomato plants, the plant, and finding a new walk around the village.
Ah, yes.
So
The other side of the tracks.
Ah,
and
yeah.
gardening. Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
And nice Idris Murphy in the background.
Nice. Lovely painting. Anyone else? Maybe we have to.
Who else has got one?
What?
Miller.
There's a moon.
Anne, hi, Anne.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm just struggling to unmute myself. Yeah, it's a moon viewed through the window of our house, and I actually just have been feeling really surprisingly peaceful and calm,
Yeah.
and all the things I used to rush around doing have gone away and been cancelled. It's quite peaceful.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Thank
great,
you.
isn't it? I've been enjoying the piece. Yeah. Thank you, Anne. Who else wants to do one? There's Patricia.
What you got, Patricia?
Where's Patricia?
I don't know how much you can see that. It was a series of concentric circles with arrows going in and out. The arrows going out were me reaching out to people. So people like yourselves, this is my first engagement with you. And then the arrows pointing into the center were actually the time for reflection and thinking and doing things for myself.
Lovely.
Great. Thank you.
Well, I think it'd be really good to add to those drawings as well. Richard, have you got any, some quick tips for us about anxiety and concerns with coronavirus and what it's doing to us?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, a virus, the coronavirus is a very sneaky virus, and it gets around in ways that we think we know and generally do, but it is interesting where it turns up. I think one of the things, of course, that is always in the paper is how many deaths there are, and we've had a lot of deaths in this country. We've had a lot of deaths in an age group where people are in very latter parts of their lives, hence the nursing home stuff. And I suppose one thing is that below that age group, and even with that age group, if you flipped the numbers round in terms of survival, in the early curves, for example, even if you were in your 80s, you would have an 85% chance of surviving. And for younger than that, if you go down, it rapidly drops. It drops in 60s, 70s and 60s, still significant. But in terms of the odds of dying from it, they are actually quite low. Now that may sound strange because all the newspapers, rightly, and I'm not in any sense belittling, the large number of deaths and the terror that is. But the majority by far have an illness that may be hardly anything, or maybe like cold. And quite a lot of people who will get an illness that may last a fortnight, make them feel absolutely awful, but still manageable at home. And for the general population of the working age group, if you get it, the outcome is very, very likely to be okay.
Hmm.
The other thing is that we see quite clearly there are differences in ethnic background, which seem to be independent of any other associations with that background. The other thing is to do with what I call what everybody calls a viral load. In other words, if you get a few of these rotinoviruses, then you probably won't even know about it, and you might even develop an immune response without knowing it. If you've got a lot all at once, then it's bound to be worse and develop more quickly and more difficult to overcome. And so this is why particularly, of course, folks in a healthcare setting are likely to get it just because of the load of the virus that's around. Mercifully, those numbers, though terrible to exist at all, are actually pretty low concerning the number of people who are working on those things. So we are, as another good thing, if you noticed, we seem to be over the peak of the mortality rate. If you look at the curve from that, if you do look at the curve, you'll find it's very strange. It sort of goes up and down, but it has sort of peaks and then troughs and peaks and then troughs and peaks and then troughs. And if you do that, and the real reason for that is very straightforward. Deaths aren't reported at weekends. So at weekends, it looks rather low, and then on Monday morning, there's a spike. But it doesn't give a very good idea that what the sort of average rate is, which is definitely going down. On the other hand, our case rate is still higher than we would like it to be. But if the case rate is going up, but the death rate is going down, that means that the people catching it are getting immune without suffering too badly. And that's quite good. The fact that the Nightingale ward has closed down and mothballed, the fact that several other of those are hardly being used, means that we've over-provided, or actually, in some ways, that's also a reflection that demand for that is getting less, which means the severity of patients is getting less. The real difficulty, of course, is what we really want to be is immune without getting ill.
Yes, please.
That's the balance which everybody is trying to work out. And it's not going to be the same in every country. It's not going to be the same in different communities. It's no surprise at all that where there is a dense population, that's where the greatest number is going to happen. Both there are more people there and also it's all closer together. And that's also true, of course, it's been complained of that poorer folks are also much more likely to get more serious illness and more illness. And there are all sorts of reasons that we haven't got time to go into to explain that. But it's not necessarily that in terms of the illness they are being neglected, not at all. But there are many background things that make that so.
And should we be wearing masks, in your view?
If you're going to go somewhere where there is a chance of getting it, yes, I think you should.
Okay.
I don't think it's a high priority. It depends on duration of contact, the closeness of contact, and the age of the people who might want to wear a mask. And this is part of the problem of how to present to a nation a unified response, when really graded responses are appropriate, and that's where we are at the moment. What can we let go of that's still going to be safe?
It's going to be very interesting, Richard, isn't it, when the brakes are let off, probably this weekend?
A bit. I don't think it's too much.
How we get from where we are now to where we want to be eventually.
Yeah.
We've got about 10 minutes to go, so it'd be nice to hear from some questions or comments as well. If you have a question for the prof or the doc, ask the doc. That would be good.
There's an anonymous question that says, I would like to change my approach to my health, but my wife is not on the same page as me. Any tips?
Well, it depends what the approaches are, really, I think. Well, I think it is back to Adrian and Judy to advise how the conversation goes, that can be negotiated through. Because there is this point as well that, if you sense that there is something that is going to be beneficial for you to do, which is, everybody has that sort of sense. It's quite helpful to if that's been disagreed with, see if there's any backup for that, if you will. That this is evidentially better. So it's always nice to argue from a point that, well, actually it's recommended here, or that sort of thing. But the second thing is that, to some extent, if you feel that something is going to be helpful, dare I say it, because of the placebo effect, even if scientifically it's not, it'll improve you. And many of the drugs that we take, which are pharmacologically active, have got an extra layer called the placebo effect, just by being there.
Yeah. we could spend a long time talking about the placebo effect, but which we won't do. There's another question very quickly, quite rightly. Peter has said, we've managed to get so far without mentioning the D word, dementia.
I did just right at the beginning, but you're quite right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it worth worrying about this since we can do very little?
Well, dementia is on the list of things that is improved by exercise. It's improved by creative thinking. It's improved by social interaction. It's improved by group singing. It's improved by group activity in that way. It's improved by being amongst a multi-age group in terms of social interaction. But you're quite right. Dementia is getting to be, it's now actually the top of the list of causes of death for men. It's just gone over the level of coronary disease as being the leading cause.
So get out there and exercise and
yeah,
keep your mind active.
Crosswords. Keep your brain going. Learn a new language if you can.
It doesn't have to be too taxing. And I think one of the things which I was pleased to learn, because I'm going this way myself, and that is if you forget names, forgetting names is very common as you get older. And the trick is that if it's just due, as it were, to simple aging rather than anything worse, then you are usually able to recall a name sometime later during the next 24 hours. Well, that's worked for me so far, so I'm not going to have a scan yet.
Yeah, yeah. I think we're running out of time, Richard, which is a shame because I think we could probably easily go on for another hour. Do you want to say anything in closing?
Well, I think we didn't touch on the spiritual, which you mentioned earlier on.
Yeah.
And as I said in the book, people have very many different interpretations of what spirituality is. One guy researching this found that he found 45 definitions of that, and none of them said the same thing, which is interesting. But I think it touches on bigger things generally, and I'm very, very intrigued. I mean, we know that across the world, in terms of religion relating to spirituality, about 85% of the world follows one sort of faith or another. But there is this sort of sense of bigger dimension that is maybe outside ourselves. Some people just say it's the spirit of us inside. But very fascinating things in terms of, well, just one little snippet of data. At the Royal Free Hospital in London, one of the main London teaching hospitals was, people coming into the accident department, people coming there for various sorts of trauma and injury. And they decided to ask whether people had any interest in spiritual things or whether they might be connected with your illness, whatever it was. It doesn't have to be severe. And 71% of people said yay.
Wow. That's a surprisingly high number, isn't it?
And I think it's not far under the surface of many folks. It's not a very big conversational topic in this country. Another interesting thing, just to put another bit of data in, we had a psychiatrist at the med school, and he ran a course on what we call taking a spiritual history, which is looking to ask patients what their view of that is, whether it has any impact for them. And the medical students, sort of, I think, half dozen 8, were totally surprised how responsive people were to being asked those questions and how helpful it had seemed, which I think is really quite interesting. So those are just two little aspects of that. And the other thing is, finally, you shut up when you tell me to, the General Medical Council, which is the authority that determines what doctors should be able to do and not, in their instructions to training junior staff, which has been my world for a while, they say that a doctor has to be competent at taking a history. A history is asking the patient of various aspects of themselves. But that includes their physical state, their mental health, their social setting, and their spiritual health. So in fact, the GMC is requiring doctors to be able to take a spiritual history, which may cover religious matters that people might want to be recognized, or wider than that. So it's out there.
It's valid. It's sitting there with the other 3 things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Richard, sadly, we're going to have to draw that bit to an end.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
it's been terrific, and I'm sure people would ask more questions if we had longer, but we wanted to find out about the poll as well. Tilly, have we
show
got
us
any
what the
poll
results are.
Yes.
The results are in.
Oh, play!
Play,
Oh, good.
Hey, I can understand that one.
Yay, that's
Ah,
amazing.
So
By
play,
miles. Look at that.
play the world,
Yeah.
then tied friends and money.
Yeah, and then home gets just a little
Home
mention
is
of
last.
6%.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So play. Okay. Well, we'll have a couple of weeks to think about bringing you a really terrific session
I'm
on
so
what that
pleased.
means.
I'm
You were hoping for that, weren't you?
I was hoping for that.
One very playful person here.
Well, very good. That's staying young, you see. That's what
Yeah,
it
it
is.
is.
Stay you need.
When writing the book, it's fascinating to see why it is that people, adults, a lot of adults, not all, stop playing. But anyway, let's not go into that.
No, go for it. Play is good.
Okay. All right. So as we said at the beginning, we're not going to email you anymore, only through the sign up. So sorry to be boring and annoying about that, but we are very sensitive to people being deluged by several emails. So if you haven't signed up, you won't get to hear from us. So please sign up in that link that came out earlier. If you want any individual coaching or support, please get in touch with us and we can talk to you about that. And also, if you would be willing to be coached in one of these sessions, let us know that as well.
And we can talk about it ahead of time and make you feel comfortable about how we might do that.
Yes, as always, think of one thing that you're taking away from tonight that you're actually going to go and do, and please let us know how that goes.
Perhaps you could write it in the comments now if you want to, but you don't have to.
Yeah, and we just want to thank Richard. So everybody clap.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you very much, Richard, for your time and your really fantastic whole attitude. It's not just about the body, it's about all these other parts that are so equally important. And it's been a delight to have your input tonight.
Thank you.
Have a great bank holiday, which, I mean, every day feels like a bank holiday at the moment. But, I hope you mess up the weekend in some way and make it feel a bit different.
Yes, find a way to mess it up. I think that's a good...
I like that.
Okay, all right.
What are you going to do, Richard?
Well, I was just actually thinking of what sweets I'd like to eat, actually.
What's your favourite sweet?
Well, my favourite sweet thing is honey, really. I get 3 bottles of that.
Ooh.
Yes.
Good.
That's very virtuous. Haven't you got anything with E numbers in it?
Oh, yeah, well, actually, ginger chocolate biscuits with lots of chocolate.
Oh, great. Okay, that's better.
Okay. Thanks very much.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And yeah,